Charles Brockton Brown's American Gothic, University of Georgia Press, and Resurrected Leather Stocking, Pathfinding in Jacksonian America, University of South Carolina Press, as well as 3 poetry collections, which are over there, I hope, entitled Two Men Fighting in a Landscape, the Aldrich Press, The Dicer's Cup, Kelsey Books, and one entitled Tableau with Crash Helmet, the Hanging Loose Press. His book reviews and critical essays have appeared in Newsweek, The New Leader, the New York Times Book Review, the American Book Review, and Poetry. His poems have won awards from Rhino, the Kansas Quarterly, and the Robinson Jeffers Tor House Foundation, and have been nominated for a Pushcart Prize and for inclusion in the Best New Poets of 2014. He lives in New York and plays, and will play this afternoon with Jim, traditional bluegrass fiddle. Please.
Thank you, George. Is this working?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's working. I might need to use it. My voice may not be as strong as George's or Jim's. Is my work?
Yeah, it's yours. I didn't touch it.
Thanks, George, for having me back.
Thank you for coming back.
Thanks, Jim, for that wonderful reading. I've always dug your wit. You had me wiping my brow with my tentacles. And it is a pleasure to be back here in this community center. You know, I used the bathroom before I came here, and in the stall was, I noticed they had a stool right next to the toilet. I thought that was so accommodating. A great idea, get your shoes shined while you're doing that. Sure. This is called Class Trip, Fall 1963. Our 9th grade trip to D.C., booked in September, put us down there in the queasy aftermath of the assassination. Shivering in our loafers, we watched from the back of a crowd as men in uniform laid the wreath at Arlington, the eternal flame fruging in the wind. As the ceremony ended, we left the group, slipped into a building, eyeballed wall after wall of austere portraits, gold-framed battle scenes, pioneer dwarfing landscapes. We rested on a bench and shared a sandwich. On the bus that night, foreheads to the glass, we stared till our eyes adjusted. There was Orion hovering over the Chesapeake, and your cashmere breast brushing my arm. The constellation to the west was America. Surfer. A hurricane at sea kicked up the waves we sported in that Labor Day. So high the lifeguards closed the beach. We didn't care. Went out as we'd gone out since mid-July. Why not? The surf was throwing down a dare, and we were 21 enough to try our luck. To gamble on the chance to brave an ocean with attitude. Combers on a tear. That last time out, my board got stripped away. I dove beneath the 2 widowmakers, fought a fool's fight with the undertow, then gave myself to the kind of wave a surfer ought to love. The bastard wouldn't let me up, kept tumbling me in its dicer's cup. I should say I was not a surfer myself, but I did have such an experience with the ocean, and you know, the day after that, I picked up the local newspaper and read how 7 people had died off the beaches of Long Island that day. You know, it was, you know, the weather's so beautiful. It just looked like a perfect beach day, but there had been a hurricane out at sea, so the water was crazy. I dedicate the next poem to all my musician friends. Old-time fiddlers convention. One leans against a tailgate tuning. One is crapped out in the shade of a tarp. One is whittling a bridge with a straight razor. One hasn't eaten for a day and a half. One's fiddle is dark as a horse chestnut and leprous with rosin. One tries to remember a tune called Why Don't You Shovel? One fiddles a Mississippi tune with drop beats and a melody so crooked no guitar player can follow it. One plays a waltz in the arc of a Coleman lantern. One crooks the pinky of her bowing hand as she bows. One has a lead sinker countersunk in the tip of his bow and bows with only a few inches of stick, using a wrist motion that calls to mind a sped-up film of someone sewing. One sings, set that jawbone on a fence, ain't seen nothing of the jawbone since. One wants to trade a cold can of red cap for some peg dope. One's bowing arm rocks back and forth like an Indian rubber camshaft. One plays stiff-backed and scowling as if posing for a daguerreotype. One spent the winter of 1969 trapping raccoons near Callicoon, New York. One was videotaped by an ethnomusicologist who wired his right arm with tiny light bulbs to study his bowing patterns. One has her strings tuned E, G, B flat, D. One tells a story about a fiddler from Virginia who had speeding tickets outstanding in North Carolina. He'd crossed the state line every summer to fiddle in the contest where the sheriff would watch for him and try to nab him after he'd received his prize money, but before he could get gone. It became a regular attraction, this fiddler says. One wears a fedora. One wears a Red Man tobacco cap. One slides plumb-perfect double stops up and down the fingerboard. One's bow-tip trails a 2-foot goatee of broken horsehair. One has been fiddling blind steer in a mud hole with a fretless banjo player for 20 minutes. One is asleep on the hood of his car. One is asleep underneath the car. One eats a green pepper as if it were an apple. One sings, I'm going home with the one-eyed Rosie. One once hung his fiddle from a tree and lay down to nap. When I woke, wasps was flying in and out the dang death hole. This one is called Ducks on the Pond. A half-dozen waddle up like pups, all curiosity and eyes. It's the 20th of December. As we stare at each other in our respective down, I'm reminded of a Memorial Day in Granville when a wood duck materialized in the stove at Dave's farmhouse. The previous night, despite a week of balmy weather, the thermometer had dipped to 40 degrees, a Canadian cold front. In the morning, a fire seemed in order. Dave prized the lid off the pot-bellied stove and froze, 2 eyes and something thrashing in the ashes. How long had it been in there? Hours? Days? Blown down the chimney by the wind? Looking for shelter? The cold snap saved the crazed thing's life, else who'd have guessed his plight. Happy ending notwithstanding, what chilled me was the thought of the creature's sudden tumbling from the sky, all blossomy updrafts, into stovepipe limbo. A cast-iron pit of cinders with no way out and the quacking of the flock receding in the distance. Such twilight zones are out there, wind shears, sinkholes, Bermuda triangles that don't show up on any radar until the screen is gone and you with it, falling, accelerating, waiting to hit bottom. The marriage gone to hell, the old neighborhood now a burnt-out brickscape of shooting galleries. The block he moved to, where lately old women in sweatshirts and plastic trench coats sleep on gratings. In a suburb of Houston, an octogenarian gardener spooks a colony of bees while mowing his lawn. An aggressive species, the damn things sting him 1,000 times. Not even the fire department can scatter the head-up swarm. Notwithstanding, we marry, move, mow our lawns. By now the ducks have looked me up and down. read my lips, and written off the prospect of bread crusts with their pond scum and algae breakfast. Oblivious to the season, they bob and drift on the ice-encrusted water. That's it from the Dice's cover. Elegy for a Pencil. Sitting on the pot, holding the book I have to review by tomorrow open in one hand and the stub of a pencil in the other, I begin to underline a phrase when the pencil scoots out from under my forefinger, rolls and disappears into the quarter-inch crack where the tile floor doesn't quite meet the wall. Double damn, I say out loud. It's an expression my father used to use when the simpler version didn't say enough. I can see him fuming over his accounts book, or looking for the double-damned cufflink he'd had in his hands just a second before, or marveling, I'll be double-damned, at my 9-year-old effrontery in putting his stack of Reader's Digests out with the trash after he, having read an article about the dubious effects of comic books on kids, had quietly thrown out my collection. Now I'm wondering what sorry wonderland of dust balls, plaster crumbs, roach, and mice feces the damn pencil has gotten. Or for that matter, what cobwebbed underworld my father, the life insurance underwriter, dead 17 months now, has gone to inhabit. How long is this going to take, he asked, lucid during the afternoon of his last day. Beyond the halfway mark myself, I'll find out soon enough. Meanwhile, I'm down on my knees and coming up empty. Deadline notwithstanding, I've disappeared like the stub beneath the floorboards where anger, grief, love, fear, and guilt persist. Dust bunnies no broom can scatter. The section of this book that I haven't ever read from is a section where I'm imitating or parodying other authors. So I thought I'd read a few poems from that section. You know, a poet named John Donne wrote a poem called Valediction Forbidding Mourning. And his style of poetry was to use a lot of outrageous figures of speech. So I'm sort of half parodying, half imitating in this poem called A Malediction Forbidding Mourning. As exhausted athletes sleep away, dreaming of three-point jumpers drained, passes intercepted, double play balls scooped, home court advantages gained, so do I love to sleep. Through dawn and breakfast summons, first alarm and snooze, my shades invariably drawn, my head is lolling on my arm, and means to loll the morning through. I'm catching Z's till noon or 1:30, 1:45, 2. I like to sleep, Jack, till I'm done. A sleeping man is such a thing as an anti-personnel device. Wise men pause before venturing to approach, tiptoe by like mice. Sleep's a sort of chimney sweep scouring the brain's besmuttered flue. A toilet plunger that will keep mind's toilet functioning good as new. An automobile mechanic's truck, it tows us out of emotional ruts. Night's grease monkey, it tries its luck at bracing the psyche's overtaxed struts. A good sleep like tweezers plucks unruly thoughts from the inner brow and like a velvet pitchfork mucks the decks of ego's garbage scow. So don't come piping round my door with your hale and hearty rise and shine and up and at 'em and sleep no more. A pox upon your vertical spine. I mean, the fact of the matter is I spent 6 decades getting up, you know, not at the crack of dawn, but nice and early and not always when I wanted to. And I retired about a year ago, and one of the nice things was that for the first 6 months I realized, you know, hey, I don't have to get up. I can actually sleep an extra hour if I need to. So I sort of grew into this. The next one is called Off the Fashion Police, and it's for William Matthews, who's a great poet who lived right in my neighborhood, and I wish I had known. You know, I knew his work, and I just I never realized he was that nearby. The Pigeons green, mauve, orange, coral, gray should turn our stomachs. Such a color clash. Nature, though, is nothing if not brash, and culture's a mishmash. Who's to say what matches what? Which combination works? Why this much repetition makes us dance, and that much makes us drowsy? In Provence, a poetry of elaborate formal quirks was counted sexy. The troubadour's bee's knees. Shell-encrusted gewgaws once made queens swoon. Sketches of industrial machines inspired Miro's color symphonies. Fashion laughs at any litmus test but one. Whatever lasts, laughs best. And Miro has a show at the Museum of Modern Art right now. I'd go to see anything Miro does. This is a poem called For Galway Canal, a great poet who passed away some years back. And well, I don't really need to say much more about it. I'll just read the poem. Celebratory verse comes slow to my hand. Much as I love the avenue bearing the initial of Christ into the New World, that was the name of one of his books. My muse is Germanic. Think the wanderer, the seafarer, Anglo-Saxon elegies whose charred ruins, hag-ridden exiles, tribal codes, and ubi sunts. You know that phrase, ubi sunt? Where have they been? Where have they gone? Makes this Bronx refugees, sorry, bungled the whole line by giving you that. Let me back up. Think the wanderer, the seafarer, Anglo-Saxon elegies whose charred ruins, hag-ridden exiles, tribal codes, and ubi sunts make them this Bronx refugees' ride touchstones. Yet, like you, I came to love at least a slice of Avenue C, part of a hood so run down and forgotten, a bar that booked bluegrass musicians was able to hang on for a decade beyond the millennium, following its retro bent long after commercial rents on First had jumped several orbitals, and the charming pre-war fire traps on Avenue A had gone co-op. 9C, the doggery on the corner of 9th, where the likes of the Rockhouse Gamblers retailed Stanley Brothers ballads and the death of Jimmy Martin was commemorated by an ad hoc free concert featuring nationally known talent, whose manic fans spilled onto the sidewalk, where latecomers stewed and settled for whatever they could hear filtering through a half-open door. 9C, a dive, surrounded by century-old tenements, liquor stores, mom-and-pop bodegas, crack dens, chop shops, and the odd itinerant snow cone vendor, roasted nuts peddler, or peeled orange hustler, whose urban mandolinists and banjo pickers, inured to boombox salsa, would warm up across the street in a rubble lot come community garden, its cyclone fence symmetrically festooned with sculptures made of junked phones, welded utensils, soda cans, plastic dolls, umbrella struts, and tinted bottles. A lot whose scant half-acre was planted in or colonized by ferns, mimosas, berry bushes, green beans, fulvous herbs, viney nondescripts, and weedy woodalls. Foliage you'd want to hack with a machete, so dense and tendrilled was the life foliating there. Which, of course, is what your poem delineates. The cheek-by-jowl, hodgepodge mishigas of Avenue C, aorta of America. Which never was the city on the hill, it fancied itself, but a city of the plain blessed with a first-rate harbor, a commercial port with an outperforming public relations department, whose promotional brochures and slogans were so ennobling we bought them. But having bought them, eventually unwrapped them, held them to the nose to see what we had got. Bloodied during a voter registration drive in Louisiana, you caught a whiff of something noisome, not as advertised. The promise was broken too freely, is how you put it in your poem on Avenue C. Oy vey, oy vey. I met you once in 1973, a fledgling wage earner and musician. I was subletting a salt box in Wainscott, a community of potato farms sandwiched between the Hamptons on Long Island's frou-frou, stinking rich South Fork. He knocked on the door in your red and black woodsman's shirt late one October afternoon, as an ocean breeze made the willow in the yard sway and shimmer. You had come to see Nate, the lessee. He's gone to the city, I said. Who shall I tell him called? Galway Canal, you said. The poet, I asked. Yes, you said. I write a bit myself, I said. But my poems are rubbish. That's good, you said. Don't throw them out. A bad poem is the larval stage of a good poem. I wish I had that moment back. I should have sent you off with an armload of newly chopped kindling, some windfall Bartletts from the orchard, a bag of cauliflower from the garden out back. Some token of thanks for such astute, uncondescending words. I'll tell Nathaniel you came by, I said. So long, you said, walking back to your Schwinn with the jury-rigged basket. You know, I haven't been timing myself very well. I hope I'm not running too late, but I do want to read from this.
You're doing very well.
Yeah.
Read on.
You've been going about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks. This is called Disappearing. My friend Nine lived in a railroad flat. Once, for the hell of it, we disappeared. Not out, as anyone could see, the apartment doors still chained from the inside, but up. Climbed crabwise up the walls of the long, dark, narrow hallway and wedged ourselves up near the ceiling in a sort of sprinter's crouch. Black chinos making us inconspicuous among the cobwebs. Basketball sneakers providing all the traction needed to practically relax up there, 8 feet off the ground. Eventually, his mom wondered where we'd gotten to. We watched her scurry back and forth below us, heard her call us, poke into closets, grow more frazzled by the minute. At last, when she bustled back to scour the guest bedroom for a second time, we crabbed down, took chairs in the living room, grabbed some comic books, acted as if we'd been sitting there all along, and where was she coming from with these questions, her hair a red tornado. That prank was a non-starter where I lived. Our 3-room apartment had no hallway. All 4 of us slept in one bedroom. Privacy was 2 minutes in the bathroom with the door locked. But then wasn't privacy what the imagination was for? In my monkey days, the linen closet was a ladder whose rungs, shelves, I'd climb to disappear for an hour or so. Flashlight in pocket, book inside shirt, pulling the door almost shut after me as I ascended. Up top, stowed among comforters, I had vanished still further into piracies, western standoffs, haunted houses, Sherlock Holmes mysteries, all the while savoring the mystery of me that was making the household buzz below. How many times did they open that door to look for me behind the low-slung improvised rack of kids' coats as I floated on my back 6 feet above, the flashlight quickly smothered under blankets, bedspreads, pillows. Never more present than when I went absent. I was both there and elsewhere, the story of my childhood. This is dedicated to a musician named Bob McQuillan who passed away some years ago. It's called Tunesmith. Reels, jigs, waltzes, hornpipes. The Marines vet and former shop teacher wrote more than 1,300 tunes. Played boomchuck piano for 70 years at contra dances throughout New England. Mandolin, guitar, and accordion too, but mostly piano. He used the